Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching this from in the world. I'm your host, George Kushner with Toyow, and welcome to Toyow Talks episode number 3. This one should be a riveting conversation. This is all about tokenization going mainstream. And today in this episode, we will speak with the Hindustan Times and how tokenization is making its way into mainstream media, as well as we'll explore how and where media and blockchain intersect, the point of that, the difference between coverage hype, if you will, and actual adaptation. And we're going to ask, what does the road look like for tokenizing assets going forward and public trust? And today I'm super excited to have with me our guest, who is Anirudh Singhal, who is with the Hindustan Times. And we're going to kick it off here quickly. So again, Anirudh, welcome, and we appreciate your time and can't wait to jump in and dive right in and hear all your thoughts. And with that as a dovetail, let's begin. And if you could share a little bit with me and the audience, your journey into media and how you actually started exploring blockchain and tokenization and the stories that go along with it.
Yeah, first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you, George, for having me on Toyo Talks. I'm really excited
Anirudh,
to be
I
here.
can't hear you. I'm not sure if it's...
Is this better now? Am I audible? Because
I can't hear you. Hang on one second. Apologies.
George, am I audible now?
No,
It's
not.
Strange, because I could hear you completely fine.
Let me check with... hang on. I'm trying to isolate
is
whether
it
it's
fine
me or
now?
you. Apologies, folks. That's live. It's
Is it
live
okay
television for
now?
you.
Yeah. Actually, I can hear you completely fine.
Can you hear me,
George,
Anirudh?
is this okay now? Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
I can't hear you. And I'm not sure if the audience can hear you or not. We can hear you both. Okay, so this must be a me thing.
Yeah. So I am. Let me see if there is some tech issue at my end. Is this better now? Can you hear me, George?
Apologies.
Should I try and log in again?
Hey Anirudh, I think the issue is on George's end.
I can hear you fine right now. Anirudh,
Okay,
speak.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear Anirudh.
That's weird. Okay, let me try something.
Okay. I think in
Yeah, let's see.
George, can you hear me now?
I can see him speaking. I hear you totally fine, but for some reason I cannot hear.
This is a first, guys, so please bear with us while we solve this out.
Try again now.
George, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Perfect, great. So we have solved that. Thank you, Nara.
No worries.
Okay, so thank you, George. As I was saying, good evening to everyone, and thank you for having me on Toyo Talks. We started with a little bit of a bump, I would say, because of the tech, but I think that's the world we are living in. We don't know what will hit us at what point of time. And but nevertheless, let me start with a little bit about myself. So I started my corporate journey with Whirlpool in the corporate finance department. I spent a couple of years with them before deciding to move on to the market side and work for close to about 15 odd years in investment banking with organizations such as JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and JM Financial over here in India, looking after the public markets, private equity, as well as mergers and acquisitions. And we did a lot of work in terms of strategizing how businesses will look in the future. So, irrespective of any transaction that you look at, everything is being done to drive a certain business outcome. And after 15 years in investment banking, I decided to leave the sell side and join buy side. And it's been a very, very interesting journey over here at HT Adventures. What are we essentially trying to do over here in Hindustan Times? We are trying to basically understand, study, and form an opinion on certain trends which we are seeing and which we believe will become mega trends in times to come. And in terms of trying to do that, while we are trying to do that and understanding these things, we are also always on a lookout for very, very passionate founders who really want to make a difference within that industry. And then we are trying to work with them and trying to see how we can do value creation, both one in terms of trying to get this trend into a mega trend as we wanted it to kind of achieve, and secondly also during the process also have a situation where we are able to widely disperse the value proposition to consumers at large, because we as a media organization have a very large reach. And while we were doing some of these things, one of the very interesting trends that we kind of identified very early is fractional ownership of assets. Now, what is fractional ownership of assets? We all want to buy assets, but maybe at any given point of time, we don't have resources sufficient to buy that particular asset. And that is where we said that this is something which is going to become big in future. Today, if you look at it, it is possible to own real estate, it is possible to own cars fractionally and not completely. And this is something that we started working on, and within this frame tokenization is extremely critical, because what tokenization does, that it provides enhanced security and it also increases marketability of the particular product. So I think that is how we are looking at this particular theme. George, I hope I'm able to answer your question.
Well, you did, and I think that I could almost erase all the other questions going forward, and you and I literally could spend the next 5 hours discussing so many things that you just said. We also have extraordinarily similar backgrounds. I myself spent half of my career on the sell side, institutional fixed income derivative sales, and then moved over to the buy side, did that for a long, long time, and finished my, TradFi career, as the cool kids call it these days, in private banking. And then I got into this insanely crazy, wacky, awesome Web3 world about maybe 7, 8 years ago. And so I can see where your journey, and again, you and I could probably speak for hours and hours and hours. And I think that, one thing that you mentioned, and for the folks that have heard me speak about this before, it's just one of my major passions, and that is the tokenization of basically everything. I mean, you name the asset, you name the industry, everything's going to be on chain. And the broad case applicability of where it's going is, I just don't think people really fully appreciate today. It's kind of had this test run in financial services, and now it's broadening out and broadening out. And so I do think, to your point, the fractional ownership is a game changer, not only from a liquidity standpoint to the asset owner, but getting new type of investors that can now chip in $5 or $10 and not have to put up $1 million or 5 million or 10 million. So it's clearly going to change the world, and agree 1,000% with you. All right, awesome first question. So we're off to the races. Again, folks, sorry about the technological glitches we had up front, but it seems like we are totally good now and moving forward. So let's talk about, Anirudh, from your perspective, how has mainstream media been covering blockchain and tokenization solutions so far? Are we still the buzz, if you will, stage, or are we moving more towards, call it maybe a little bit more mature industry, if you will, something with a little bit more real substance, if you will?
Interesting question, George. In India, I can talk about. I think in India, tokenization is still a buzzword. Okay, why is it? Why it is a buzzword? Because I think people still don't understand it. As you rightly said, I think it's just very early trends right now in India with respect to tokenization and fractional ownership of assets. I think a lot of good work is happening over here, and overall, I have seen generally it takes time for people to build trust on a particularly, especially a new industry. Okay, and therefore a lot of thing has to be done in terms of raising awareness. A lot of work needs to happen also from, I would say, the responsibility of the media is that much larger, because for you to be able to bring out a story with respect to tokenization, you should be able to fully understand and appreciate the benefits of that. And I think that is where we at Hindustan Times, we are kind of trying to get into this fairly early, where we are trying to understand this. And you cannot understand a particular concept until and unless you are dealing with it very closely. So we are doing that. And I personally believe that while it is the buzzword, I think it will move to real substance fairly quick. I see a lot of excitement, especially amongst the Gen Z, in terms of having fractional ownership of assets and have ownership of, I would say, alternate assets, including tokenized assets.
Look, I think that you said several things that are key and critical, and beginning with education. I think that it's eerily similar to me when I, switched a part of my career and moved heavily into this thing called alternative investments. So hedge
Yeah.
funds, private equity, fund of funds, venture capital. And there were so many misnomers and misconceptions due to the lack of education. And I think people in blockchain, when you poll the average woman or man on the street, they might not even know what that is, but Bitcoin, they probably certainly have heard of, and they'll have an
Yeah.
opinion. And most of them are skewed, this way, if you will, not the better. But I think that having reliable sources that can provide content and education to get people up to speed, I think that's pivotal. Now, at the same time, not to sound too hypocritical, I don't think that the average man or woman on the street needs to be a blockchain technologist. That's just like today. If you ask most people in the world that walk around with a mobile phone or walk around with a credit card or an automobile, how those things, or their computer for that matter, how those things work, they don't know. I don't know. None of us know. Then why do we use it? Because everybody else in the world uses it. We have this mass broad adoption. And I think that crypto is going to get there. Digital assets are going to get there. Blockchain is going to get there. And I think a part of that is, a lot of these countries and governments haven't stepped up and provided true regulatory clarity. The US is finally about there. And then I really think we're starting to see a massive amount of institutional adoption that's coming down the pike here very soon. Okay, let's move on to the third question. What role does story play in making companies' ideas like tokenization relatable to everyday readers? That's one point. And then, do you see assets like real estate, art, or films eventually becoming as familiar to readers as, say, stocks, bonds, commodities, currencies?
Very interesting question, and I'll pick up the last thing that you said, George. So I think yes, I definitely do agree that the governments need to do a lot in terms of providing the regulatory, I would say, clarity around investment into these assets. And in India specifically, I think we have not seen the government taking a particular stance with respect to these assets. I think everyone is understanding it, and hopefully we will have that clarity fairly soon in India. The other critical thing is that you asked me is that what role does storytelling play? I think storytelling plays a huge amount of role in terms of getting the message across. And just like you were talking about alternative investments into private equity funds, etc., in India, when the mutual fund business really started, everyone viewed that business with a lot of skepticism. They said, what is this? This is investment into equities through a fund manager, and is this really safe? Is this something that we should be doing? And a lot of questions were raised, and this is I think way back in early 90s we used to have these kind of questions. And today look at where we have moved. Today in India, on a monthly basis, people are investing through systematic investment plans in excess of, I would say, close to about $5 billion roughly, is what is kind of coming into mutual funds, and that is one of the very strong sources of capital into the public markets. So I'm saying everything. And what drove that? Okay, And there is a very interesting campaign. All the mutual funds in India got together. It was an investor awareness kind of a campaign, storytelling as you call it, under the banner called Mutual Fund Sahi Hai. To translate it for the broader audience, it basically means that mutual funds is the right way to invest into the stock markets. And I think that's what kind of caught the imagination of people. And they really felt that, yes, it is safe, it is a good means of value accretion. And that's when you started seeing inflows coming in. I think the same thing needs to happen with tokenized assets, because ultimately, as you rightly said, you may not understand the technology, but what people do understand is investing. And when you are investing into an asset and it's a profitable investment, um, I think that the trend kind of just picks up.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And again, coming back to this, important point about education and the correct education and having reliable sources for that said content. And I think storytelling, story explaining, we speak about this a lot in our world, that one of the main hindrances coming into the Web3 world from the Web2 world, if you will, is the UI UX. It's just extraordinarily complicated, and which is good news in the fact that that's not a Herculean task to overcome. Don't get me wrong, there are a ton of moving parts to it and things that need to be done on the back end. But I think as this becomes as simple as buying something online with a credit card, or putting down your smartphone to pay with something for stable coins, which is all here and coming, right? It's just going to proliferate and flourish. Then you're going to start to see more and more. We saw the retail led this whole charge up until pretty much now. And now I think once the governments globally provide regulatory clarity, whether it's MICA or Europe and what's going on in India here, I think that then you're going to see this mass. I think 26 is going to be a huge year for institutional adoption. And then you're going to see the rest of retail coming in. Because again, today, and people have heard me quote this ad nauseum, the statistic, you're only talking about 5% of the world even owns digital assets. I mean, nobody owns this stuff really, And so for people listening, I always get this question, is it too late? Is it too late? I wish I knew analogies of other sporting events around the world, but I'm going to be really American centric here. And if you think showing up to an American baseball game to watch batting practice before the game is too late, that's about where we are, in my humble opinion. I think we're still incredibly early with all this stuff. So, all right, let's move on to question number 4. That is, why does our partnership make sense for Hindustan Times, and how do you see it shaping how audiences gauge with tokenization?
So George, as we were discussing and as I was telling you, when we interact with the younger population today, okay, and anyone who is entering into the work stream, let's say, today they don't have that $5 million or $1 million to buy a particular asset which they want to buy. But they still want to kind of be a part of the journey and still want to kind of invest into that particular asset class and benefit from investing into that asset class. And therefore tokenization is here to stay. I think what you will see is that increasingly, as you rightly said, we are in early stages. It's not too late. We are in very early stages. And I think the true potential of this entire tokenization as a theme is going to play out in front of us over the next few years. And this is what excites us about this entire journey. And as I said, we identified this trend about fractional ownership of assets. We believe that until and unless we work very, very closely, we will not be able to understand it fully. And therefore, this partnership makes tremendous sense for Hindustan Times, because not only are we trying to learn in the process, we are also trying to make sure that whatever we are learning, we are kind of passing it on in a very, very measured and responsible manner to audiences at large so that they can equally benefit from this.
Well, we are honored and humbled and most appreciative of the partnership. And I think, kudos to you and your team for really having the vision. And again, it sounds so funny for me saying this, in the fact that, this industry is now 16-ish years old. Blockchain's been around a lot longer than that, but really
Yeah.
since it's, this renaissance, if you will. And yet companies that are at this stage right now today, I think they're going to be known as the leaders, the pioneers, when we look back in 5, 10, 15, 20, even 50 years from now.
Hmm.
Because, and again, people have heard me say this a million times, a lot of people have been sleeping on this, on blockchain technology. And whether they were waiting for the regulatory clarity provided by their government, that's a totally valid point. Whether they just thought it was a joke, as I first did when I came into the space coming from Wall Street, knowing everything about everything and totally dismissing it when I first heard about it. And then I realized after doing research, what a dumb person I was being, ignorant person I was being. And I think that a lot of companies, and I don't want to call them ignorant, but I think they're just sleeping on it for whatever reason. But I think they're going to be backpedaling very, very quickly here when they see their competitors in their peer group moving a lot of things on chain, whether it's their logistics or supplies or their client. Like, again, we could go down and down and down and down. So I do think that companies, and like you and your team, again, you're going to be considered on the forefront and very avant-garde in your way of thinking. Okay, awesome. So next question, public trust is key, as we know, for any new business, but certainly when it comes to technology, like you were mentioning, when mutual funds first came to India, investors were, is this going to be safe for us? Is it going to be okay? So certainly for tech, I think you take that and put a multiplier on it because people don't understand technology. Most of us, that is. So what do you see as the biggest challenge in building that trust, and what role can credible media brands like the Hindustan Times play in shaping that confidence around these emerging innovations and technologies?
Again, very, very interesting, George. So, just on your last point, I think when you were talking about companies sleeping over it, I think, see, when you're talking about awareness, we are also talking about awareness for these companies that this is something which is good for their business as well. I can talk to you about a lot of things that we are seeing in terms of very established global companies coming to us with questions around some of these things, and we are trying to kind of address those concerns to them. Coming specifically, therefore, to your point on trust, I think trust is extremely critical. It is critical for all stakeholders in this industry, and until and unless they have that trust, they will not be able to um, fully, I would say, benefit from investing into these kind of assets. So we within HT, we take this trust as a responsibility upon us, because as a media organization, we need to keep the trust of close to about 200 million Indians who are actually visiting our platforms on a daily basis. So what we try and do is that whatever we are putting out in the public domain, we take extreme care in terms of verification of what we are putting out. And we try and give a very balanced view of in terms of highlighting both the benefits as well as the risk of adopting a particular strategy. So I think what we are going to be doing is that this ecosystem, if this ecosystem has to develop and thrive, we will need all stakeholders to come together and drive that value creation, whether it is the government and the regulator. So we will, through this partnership and otherwise as well, what we are looking forward to is trying to kind of create an ecosystem within India around investing into these assets. And we are having a lot of conversations with a lot of government people as well, in terms of what are the challenges they are seeing. Because see, government also does not want to kind of, they want to have an enabling framework. They don't want business not to happen in India. So but they might have certain concerns. Now those concerns need to be addressed. So that's the role that we want to play, where we act as a bridge in case they have any concerns. Otherwise, we want them to facilitate this process more and more, so that more and more people can benefit from this.
And I think that was just perfectly said. I think that in the United States, at least under the, and this is not a political comment, just says what it is, under the past administration, and with the way the SEC was basically ruling by, intimidation, if you will, that is not the way to foster new technology. That is not the way to promote growth. That is not the way to create jobs. And so, to your point, working with the government, again, at this point in time, I think any government on planet Earth that isn't assessing blockchain technology and what it's going to do for their economy, and forget the digital asset side of it, just from record keeping standpoint, from a logistics standpoint, to files on citizens, all these different things. And I think working in tandem and conjunction with them and helping educate them and getting them up the curve and speed only makes the Hindustan Times even more credible and reliable, or any other entities that are doing these. And I think it's very, very important that we have governments around the world that are pro blockchain, pro digital assets, and are looking to set it up correctly and properly, and more importantly, provide a clear rules of engagement. What is okay? What is not okay? It's black and white, and let the entrepreneurs and market participants, go at it. That's the key.
Yeah, it's a free market at the end of the day.
100%. Okay, here we go. Question number 6. Do you think India's media landscape is uniquely positioned to shape how tokenization narratives are understood compared to the global media?
You are getting me into trouble now, George.
Yeah.
Okay, but I don't know about this one, but see, today we are in a globalized world, and any trend which is emerging is going to be captured very, very well by the Indian media as well as by global media. But I think the difference will come in terms of, I would say, as I said, it will one what will be the key differentiators in terms of coverage. One, how good do you understand it yourself? And I think over there you will see that Indian media is generally very, very proactive in terms of trying to understand the new tech trends which are happening globally, and they will want to understand it and therefore cover it well for their readers as well. So I think you will see that Indian media is actually at par with global media when it comes to coverage of new tech trends. Um, where there might be a difference is in terms of, like you mentioned, in terms of SEC and the change, whatever it is happening, in terms of certain things which are changing, that just brings a particular narrative more in front and catches the public imagination, therefore. So I think over there probably Indian media is slightly behind right now global media, but overall I would feel that Indian media is at par with global media in terms of covering these narratives at this point of time.
It's interesting. I do it. I'm just a voracious reader, and I probably like a not smart person. I signed up very early on. I signed up for every industry email I could get my hands on, and
Yeah.
my inbox on a daily basis is absolutely cluttered with Web3, flooded and cluttered. So I just put two words together with Web3 emails. And so
Yeah.
clearly there are a ton of Web3 news sources. However, when it comes to the mainstream media and a more diversified publication such as yours, or even New York Times, Wall Street Journal, whatever, Washington Post, I think that they're still, if you read their papers, very, very rarely do you see any blockchain or crypto stories. Every now and then, at least here in the United States, if there's some type of regulatory speakings going on, they might pick up a story. Certainly, if there was something bad that happened in crypto, they're going to pick that up. But I think to have reliable global news sources, just like you have beat reporters in all these different verticals, and clearly you might already have a financial markets coverage team. But is their eye really looking at digital assets, and even on the technology side? Because again, that's just one component, the digital asset side. But really, the blockchain side, is your tech team crew and our global media tech team crews really starting to pump out and look at information on blockchain? I don't know that we're really there yet, but I think every day we're maybe moving a little bit closer and more, towards that goal. But again, in my humble opinion, over the next, call it 36 odd months, plus or minus, all these terms and words that we're speaking about, they're going to be as ubiquitous as, talking about NVIDIA chips. I don't know quite to that level, but you understand it's literally all just coming online right now.
No, it's true. It's true, actually. And I'm not saying that the coverage which the mainstream media is doing is adequate or is great. I'm saying that today, if you look at it, it's a similar amount of coverage you are seeing. Is it something? Is Indian media spending enough time and energy to understand these new trends? Yes, they are. Now, whether they feel that it is something, and in what manner they need to report it out, I think that's where that balancing is still happening. But you will see that this trend will pick up, George, very, very surely.
I agree. I think, again, it's going to be, once the institutional players start coming into the space, and everybody, there's going to be that acronym, that FOMO acronym, where all the retail's like, wait, what's going
Yeah.
on here? And again, I think that, from from their vantage point, again, looking at buying these fractional assets, as we just discussed, when in any other time in history, they were locked out. There was no way they'd be able to buy
Yes.
$10 worth of a Picasso painting or $50 of a apartment building in downtown, you pick the city. So I think that is
Yeah.
absolutely game changing coming online. Okay, here we go. Question number 7. If you had one piece of advice for media professionals covering tokenization or real world asset tokenization or any solutions building on top of blockchain, what would that be?
Well, the first thing that I will tell, and we talked about it, is that you should first own it, because when you own it, you understand it better. It's like, if you don't own a particular asset, you are just, I would say, thinking that this is a particular way in which this asset will perform, will not perform. You are a skeptic. Let me put it this way. But when you own that asset and you have reaped the benefits of that ownership, then your conviction in that asset class becomes that much higher. So I think that's the first thing that I will tell them. And having said that, I think the other thing which is very, very critical for a media professional is that they have to keep it very, very simple for readers to understand it. Because if you try and make it extremely complicated, then the message will just get lost. So you will need to see that how you are communicating it to your audience, so that they can benefit from the learnings that you have taken, and yet at the same time not get totally confused about it.
I think that owning it first is key and critical. And the first thing I thought about when you said that is, if I've never ridden a bicycle, but I become an expert by looking at, some type of open AI or Anthropic or Perplexity and read every book that's been ever written about riding a bicycle.
Yeah.
And I'm proficient, I know how to do it, but yet you take a bicycle and you run it up to about 30 miles an hour, then you plop me on top of it for my first time, you know what's going to happen. So
Yeah.
to your point, testing it, trying it, investing in even little drips and drabs of just buying $5 worth just to see what it's like and moving things around. Because to your point, it's hard to articulate to readers and educate them if you yourself haven't done it. Getting back to the bicycle analogy, so I think owning it, testing it, and again, the beautiful thing about it is, we're talking $5. $5
Yeah.
is some of the minimums on some of these platforms. I think the other thing you mentioned, which I'm a huge advocate of, and we kind of touched on this a few minutes ago, was I love the acronym, the KISS technique. Keep it simple, stupid. And maybe some people don't like the stupid part, but keep it simple. And that's the whole thing. Coming into Web3, as we spoke about just a few minutes ago, the UI, the UX it's very different and it's very intimidating. But yet, once you do it a few times, just like anything else in life, when you're learning anything, the hardest part is opening the first page of the book to start
That's right.
learning it. And same thing here. I think the hardest part is to dip your toe in the proverbial blockchain pool, whether it's reading, whether it's watching videos, whether it's speaking to people, and then actually maybe getting involved and doing a little bit of it. But once you do, I think it's going to open up so many eyes, again, just from the transparency, and everything's open and it's out there. And again, we all know the other many attributes of blockchain technology and how it really differentiates from the Web 2 world. But you do have to start somewhere. And so your journey needs to begin with some of the things that we just discussed. So, okay, all right. We are already, time goes quick. We're already down to the last and final question. And that is, what message would you share with everyday readers who are just beginning to hear about the tokenization of real world assets?
Okay, so I would say that as an individual, it is extremely critical for every individual to look at alternate assets. Now, we were discussing there are multiple alternate assets available today. You want to, when you are building out an investment portfolio, you have to put a part of your investments into debt, a part into equity, and then a part into alternate assets. Now, when you are looking at alternate assets, the world is very, very large. There's a very interesting conversation, George, I'll tell you about, which I had, I think, about 10 years back with a friend of mine. And we were passionately debating on the prospects of Bitcoin and whether Bitcoin will do well, or it's a bubble waiting to burst. And at that point of time, if I remember correctly, I think Bitcoin was trading at somewhere around, I think, $10,000. Okay, it was not early. It was we were debating it's quite late to join this wave. Now it's like $10,000. Oh, it's rallied significantly, and look at where Bitcoin is today. It's more than 10x from that level during this time period. So when you're looking at alternate assets, the timing is, as you rightly said, is it late, is it early? You cannot determine it. You need to start somewhere. Okay, and believe me, at a later point of time, in hindsight, you might believe that actually 10 years back, when Bitcoin was trading, for example, at $10,000, it was really early for us to get onto that bandwagon. So I would say invest into alternate assets. And when you're investing into alternate assets, at least my personal belief is that going forward, you will see fractional ownership of assets to be a big theme. Why it will be a big theme? Because imagine we are talking about real estate, but imagine what else can you own? You can own art, you can own IP rights, okay, through tokenization, and therefore reap the benefits of owning those kind of assets. So, critical minerals, for example, you don't know. Okay, there are multiple things which are there, which can get tokenized, and you will have a chance to own them, which otherwise you cannot own. So always remember that the person who has taken the risk early has reaped the benefits in terms of making maximum profits out of a particular investment class. So understand the asset class and then invest. And I think tokenization is here to stay, whether you invest into it or don't. But tokenization is here to stay, at least in my mind.
As I like to say here, the genie is way out of the box and it's not going back in. And I think that's the whole thing. You know, most people, it's very common, unless maybe you're a technologist, but even technologists, I think, you know, a lot of them, when they initially heard about Bitcoin, not blockchain per se, but, you know, Bitcoin, they might have been skeptical, but then they read the white paper and started doing their research like most, you know, adults do when they want to find out about something. And I had 2015, I had my first Bitcoin experience. I was like, this is a joke. And then a few years later, I started hearing more and more, started doing my research and reading, and then I had my epiphany. And so I don't think that most people moving forward are going to have to get to that educational level. I think that as they start to see the rest of the world glob on and everybody owns this stuff, you know, they'll eventually get there. But I've said this many times now on this call, that the UI UX, that component, it's got to be really simplistic for people for the mass audience to come in. I mean, we've done extensive research, and the number one pain point preventing digital assets, you know, mass and broad adoption is its sheer complexity. And all the research talks about that. That's pretty much irrefutable. So I do have a bonus question I want to ask you, just because I'm very inquisitive, and that is, you know, most industries are very interconnected, if you will, whether they have peer group meetups, whether they go to conferences and see the same thing. I don't care if it's finance, media, tech, like you name it. So my question to you is, have you seen, and, you know, either recently or over the past X amount of time, more of a proliferation of media companies to start really, you know, lifting up the hood and looking into this and seeing how, forget about reporting, but also how it might be able to help their business?
Well, I have not personally seen it. Okay, so and I think these kind of industry meetups, I think, are still very rare. Okay, and therefore they're not getting, as we were discussing, the right kind of coverage. I think a lot more needs to happen in terms of forums where we talk about these issues and where media also kind of attends, and therefore once they attend, it also becomes much more widely distributed across audiences. But I would be honest, I have not seen much of the work happening over there in these kind of associations, at least so far.
So that goes back to what I mentioned many minutes ago, that you and the Hindustan Times are really cutting edge, avant-garde. You're going to where the puck is going, if you understand what that analogy means. Well, look, that pretty much wraps it up. I thought this conversation was fantastic because I don't think most people, or let me speak for myself, I didn't really know much about how media was interplaying with blockchain and the intersection there. And I think that it's fascinating just because, again, it's one more industry that is globbing on and coming into the space. And I think many, many, many more industries here in the very, very short run are going to be doing the same. So again, everyone, today our guest was Anirudh Singhal with the Hindustan Times. I think this was a fantastic conversation. I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope the audience did. But Anirudh, thank you so much for your time and all the information. It was quite interesting.
Thank you, George, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a great rest of your evening, afternoon, or morning.